Once again, folks, thank you so very much for joining us today. We are thrilled to have this opportunity to share with you the Speak Up 2020 Congressional Briefing, the release of the national research findings. Okay, so let's jump right into it. I am once again Julie Evans, Chief Executive Officer of Project Tomorrow. And this has been an interesting time. Let's just underscore that for the last 7 months or so, as we know. We've gone through lots of different changes in how education is delivered, how we're communicating with each other, how we're functioning in the world. Things have changed for our students, they've changed for our teachers, they've definitely changed for our parents and our families. We decided that for this year's national report on the Speak Up results, we would do a combination of both looking backward at what digital learning looked like during the pandemic, as well as looking forward in terms of, is there some emerging evidence that could make us think about an education transformation that's underway. What we're going to be doing today is sharing some of those Speak Up research findings to inform both of those questions. Now, as I go through this today, of course, we will acknowledge whenever appropriate the challenges that schools and districts have faced. But also, more importantly for our conversation today, I want us to think about the lessons learned from those experiences, whether they were positive or whether they were not as positive as they could be. And of course, if you would like to follow along, our team will be doing some tweeting today using our handle at SpeakUpEd. So we'll start off by getting to know each other a little bit. You're already doing a great job. We can see that we already have a great group here because they are introducing themselves and welcoming each other to the event today. We then have some recorded remarks from the FCC Commissioner, Jessica Rosenworcel, and then our good friend that I introduced before, Chris Fleming, will give us some opening remarks as well. Then we're going to get into sharing some of these Speak Up research findings. And the way we like to do this is that I will present some of the findings relative to a couple key themes that we have. And then we're going to have a conversation with this panel of expert students that we have with us. And we'll go back and forth on that a couple of times. We definitely have left time for your questions, your comments, your thoughts, your insights on not only on what we're sharing today, but what you're actually seeing out in your schools, your districts, your communities. We'll then give you a little bit of a wrap-up call to action to continue this conversation, to continue these opportunities to learn from each other, as well as some additional resources to share. So we've already jumped ahead. See what an advanced group we are. You're already putting in your hellos and introducing yourselves. Once again, I am the CEO of Project Tomorrow. So my first job is to tell you a little bit more about Project Tomorrow. Project Tomorrow is an education nonprofit group. We've been supporting K-12 education since 1996. We're particularly focused in on the role of innovation and new learning models within the education ecosystem, particularly as to how they address equity considerations in our schools today. We're best well known probably for the Speak Up Research Project. That's why we're here today, to share with you some of those research findings. But in addition to that, we also work closely with schools and districts and communities to provide professional learning, as well as to conduct evaluation and efficacy studies. A little bit more about the Speak Up Research Project, since I'll be sharing that data with you. It is an annual research endeavor that we have been doing since 2003. And the idea is to be able to help school and district leaders make better decisions by leveraging a really important asset that they have that sometimes they don't tap into, which is the feedback of their stakeholders, most notably their students. We provide Speak Up as a free service in terms of providing out a suite of online surveys to help schools and districts collect valid feedback from those stakeholders. This is 100% a free service that we provide to schools and districts. And the schools and districts that participate in Speak Up get back all of their localized data as well as national data. We then take the national data and share it in our annual briefing that we're doing here today, as well as a series of reports and infographics and white papers that I'll talk a little bit more about as well. So let me just give you a brief introduction to our panel of experts that are here with us today. They're going to talk more once we get to our discussion time, but I want you to have an understanding of where they're coming from and the school and districts that they're representing. So we have Kellen who is with us today. Kellen, you can go ahead and wave to the audience so they know who you are. Kellen is an 11th grade student in San Marcos Unified School District, which is in North San Diego County, California. Olivia is with us from the Ysleta Independent School District, which is in the El Paso area of Texas. Olivia, you can wave to folks so they know who you are. Sarah is with us today from Talladega, Alabama, and Sarah is in grade 8. And Hikari is in grade 7, and she's with the Albemarle County Public Schools in the Charlottesville area of Virginia. All 4 of these school districts have been longstanding participants in the Speak Up research project with us, and actually their districts represent some of the top 10 districts nationwide. That's really significant for me personally because that means that those districts already recognize the importance of student voice in their local decisions. So many thanks to their school districts and to their parents and families, of course, for sharing them with us today. I also want to thank our fabulous sponsors that make Speak Up available to all the schools and districts. That include our good friends from Blackboard. Chris is with us today, as well as several members of her staff. The good folks at iBoss, PBL Works, Spectrum Enterprise, Q Wonder, Agile Education Marketing, our good friends and colleagues at BrainPop, as well as Scholastic. And a big, wonderful thank you to all of our friends and partners at EdWebNet that are hosting this event for us today. I tell people all the time what I consider to be some of the very best professional learning that's happening today for educators happens on EdWeb. So thank you so very much to EdWeb. Okay, so what we are going to do next is that I have a recorded message from Commissioner Rosenworcel, who is an FCC commissioner, Federal Communications Commission, and she was not able to join us today, but she is here in terms of a recorded message to us. If you are not familiar with Commissioner Rosenworcel, she believes very strongly that the future belongs to those that are connected, and she has been fighting particularly for equity of student access outside of school for many, many years. We have partnered with her in terms of raising awareness of what she coined the homework gap. She'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Commissioner Rosenworcel was named as one of Politico's 50 Politicos to watch, and she was profiled by InStyle magazine in a series celebrating women who show up, speak up, and get things done. I particularly like that speak up component of that. Prior to joining the FCC, she served as a senior communications counsel for the United States Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation under the leadership of Senator Rockefeller and Senator Inouye. She's a native of Hartford, Connecticut, a graduate of Wesleyan University and New York University School of Law. So EdWeb friends, could we play the commissioner's video now, please?
Hi, Project Tomorrow. I just wanted to say thank you for holding this virtual briefing. I'm Jessica Rosenworcel. I'm a commissioner at the Federal Communications Commission, and I have long counted on the research from Project Tomorrow to aid me in my thinking about schools, technology, and the E-rate program. You've been ahead of the curve when it comes to understanding just how schools and students need access to technology, just what digital equity means, and how we can solve the homework gap. Look, this cruel pandemic has changed our world. It has emptied classrooms, it has filled our hospitals, and it has crashed our economy. And millions of students are being asked to learn from home right now, and teachers are being asked to teach virtually. It's never been more important to understand the relationship between technology and students, and it's never been more important to make sure that every child is connected. I've long talked about what I call the homework gap, and that's this. You know, when I was growing up, I only needed paper, pencil, and my brother leaving me alone to get my schoolwork done. But today, every child needs an internet connection, not just at school, but also at home. It's necessary to do homework. And kids who don't have it fall into the homework gap. And we used to see them in coffee shops and fast food restaurants, writing papers and doing math sets with a side of fries while they're nursing a hot drink. Now we see them in parking lots across this country or sitting outside just trying to catch a free wireless signal, go online and go to class. There are millions of kids who fall into the homework gap. We've got to solve this part of the digital divide. I think the Federal Communications Commission should get more aggressive using its E-rate program to help do so. And I'm also confident we're going to have to talk some more in the future about digital equity, because no child who is left offline is going to have a fair shot in the future. And I just want to thank Project Tomorrow for understanding this, for the research you do, and for the discussions you're going to hold today. I'm grateful for your work. Go at it.
That's wonderful. Thank you to the Commissioner for taking time to give us that recorded message today. As she mentioned, this focus on equity, not only in terms of access outside of school, but access inside of school too, is one that propels our work all the time. Next, I would like to ask my good friend, Chris Fleming, to give us some opening remarks as well. Let me tell you a little bit about Chris. She's the Vice President of K-12 Product Marketing, Management and Marketing at Blackboard. In this capacity, she oversees the management of Blackboard's education technology portfolio designed for K-12. It includes several of their award-winning products, Blackboard Learn, Blackboard Classroom Learning Management Systems, as well as communication tools such as Blackboard Connect and Blackboard Communication Suite. She's responsible for managing the product roadmap, the overall K-12 P&L, as well as marketing strategy and other communications. Prior to Blackboard, Chris served as the Vice President of Product Marketing and Consumer Communications at a telecommunications startup for 5 years. And then prior to that, she spent 7 years in product marketing, working in telecommunications at MCI. Chris has a bachelor's degree in business with a concentration in marketing from the University of Notre Dame. I have such a pleasure having Chris here with us this year. She was with us last year in Washington, D.C. as well. And a wonderful thank you to everyone at Blackboard. Blackboard has been a partner with us on this Speak Up effort since 2007. So a very strong commitment to student voice and to advancing innovation in education. Chris?
Great. Thank you, Julie. It is such an honor to be here today. And on behalf of Blackboard, I just want to thank you and your team and all of the students who are joining us this afternoon for this discussion. It's never more important than today to have this discussion. So as Julie said, my name is Christina Fleming, and I am the Vice President of Blackboard's K-12 division. I've been at Blackboard for a little over 11 years. And for those of you who don't know us, Blackboard is a global education technology company, and we're located, our headquarters are in Reston, Virginia. Our mission at Blackboard is to advance learning together with the world's education community so that all students and educators can realize their goals today and prepare for tomorrow. At Blackboard, we serve over 5,200 K-12 districts across the United States. But more importantly, we work with educators in those districts to impact over 24 million students. Our technology solutions help build strong relationships between schools and families, connect parents and students with their teachers, and create classrooms that foster curiosity and learning, both in person and online. And all of this is so incredibly important today for all of the reasons that we are about to discuss with these students. Our focus on education spans from the very first day of the student's educational journey through their adult life. So this means we serve K-12, higher education, and professional education at Blackboard. But we cannot underestimate the importance of the K-12 experience in laying a solid foundation in those formative years. And for this reason, we focus in 3 important areas of impact for K-12 at Blackboard. First, We help with district and school communication. We help administrators effectively communicate important information to their communities, and they do this through using our notification tools, website management systems, and mobile applications. We also offer teaching and learning solutions, and this is really where we're probably most known for our learning management system, Blackboard Learn, as well as a real-time collaboration tool called Blackboard Collaborate, which helps teachers create inclusive virtual classrooms and equally engage all types of learners. And then we also help with school-to-home communication, and our new two-way direct messaging tool promotes collaboration between teachers and parents, which we all know is so important in today's remote and hybrid learning environments. These three focus areas enable us to work with schools to create personalized experiences that are fueled by data and insight for educators, parents, and students. These personalized experiences then build a strong foundation for educational success on which students will build careers, families, and futures. I am so proud of the work that we do every day on behalf of students and on behalf of educators. But more than being just a Blackboard employee, I'm also a parent. I have two teenagers here at home, and this has allowed me to see firsthand how our education system impacts the lives of students every day, especially over the last eight months, during which their learning has taken a whole new perspective during this pandemic. I've witnessed firsthand the struggles our educators have gone through every day, and I've gained a renewed appreciation for the work that they do. I've seen the impact of these recent changes and what they've had on my children as well, where they've had to build new muscles and learn in new ways. And it hasn't always been easy. But what I've experienced certainly isn't unique. Millions of other students and families have gone through this journey with me, and we're all adapting, we're all growing, and we're all learning. And this learning can't be done alone. And that's just where Project Tomorrow comes in. The research conducted by Dr. Julie Evans and Project Tomorrow plays a vital role in uncovering areas of growth and opportunity in K-12 education. The perspectives of district and school leaders, educators, students, and parents from across the country can be heard through the Speak Up Research Project. And we owe it to all of them to listen to their perspectives and make change to help everyone succeed. As a champion for K-12 education, we are proud to sponsor Project Tomorrow's research and have done so for the last 12 years. Our hope is that this information and perspective, that through this information and perspective we will hear today will help all of our leaders, principals, district administrators, and congressional leaders as they make policy decisions that will shape the future of our educational system, and by virtue of this, shape the future for our children. We have an opportunity and a responsibility to help transform K-12 education into the very best that it can be on students' behalf. Again, thank you so much to Dr. Evans for having us here today, and I'm very honored to be part of this discussion, and I look forward to the remarks and to the comments from these students. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. It's really wonderful having you here. And I love the sort of exclamation point that you put on the fact that we want this to be actionable. So it's not just about looking at some research and saying, well, that's an interesting statistic, or that's something I didn't know. It's really more about how do we make it actionable so that it impacts the policy conversations that happen in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals all across the country, that it influences the conversations that are happening in superintendents' offices and school board committee meetings, as well as the idea of right into the classroom. So it has always been our goal to make sure that the research is actionable. And that's where I love to have the opportunity each year to do this briefing so that we can bring this to the nation and then also give that call to action to move on from this. So thank you for underlining that, exclamation pointing that, Chris. It was great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, folks, well, we're going to now jump into the release of the national research findings, and we're going to do this in two parts. The title of this year's report is Digital Learning During the Pandemic, Emerging Evidence of an Education Transformation. So in the first part of our discussion, we're going to talk about the state of digital learning during the pandemic. That's our backward look to last spring and see what we learned from those experiences, and in particular, those changes that took place during the spring. We then will take a pause, and I have some questions for our students to comment on. Then we'll come back with the second part of our conversation, which is the look forward part. So what is being revealed through this Speak Up research? Where is there evidence of a potential emerging education transformation? So we're going to go from change to transformation today. So buckle up. Get ready for the journey. I'm going to start with some data findings for you. So the data we're going to be looking at was collected throughout the school year last year. So we started with our surveys being open for K-12 schools and districts to use in September of 2019. We had those surveys open until the end of June 2020. Now that means that the Speak Up dataset is a very unique dataset because we collected data both before schools closed as well as during school closures. I don't know of very many other datasets that have that comprehensive set of research and insights based on that. So we're going to look at both sides of that. In many ways, we are going to look at the comparative data to see what changes were made as a result of the sudden shift to digital learning. And then also in the second part, what does that tell us about the future? So to do this, we're going to take a look in our rearview mirror and speak a little bit about the state of digital learning through that backward perspective. So I've got a couple different evidence points I want to share with you, some things that you're probably already familiar with, but I want to give you some data to support. So we obviously saw an increase in students having access to mobile devices, tablets, laptops, Chromebooks. In many cases, those were assigned by their school or district prior to school closures. In other cases, the schools and districts provided these devices for students to use at home to support the continuity of learning. The largest increases that we saw were where schools and districts invested in Chromebooks as the device for their students to have at home. So that we saw, for example, students in the upper elementary grades, 82% of them said they were using a Chromebook for their learning experience, 80% of middle school students, and 65% of high school students. We also saw where teachers were using more digital content than they ever had before. And in particular, we saw a couple areas that jumped out as having the highest increases on a weekly basis of usage. Online animated movies and simulations, particularly to help students understand difficult concepts in science and math, became increasingly popular during school closures and the remote e-learning timeframe, an increase of 41% in weekly usage of that type of a tool. We also saw an increase in the use of online curriculum, mobile apps for learning, cloud-based collaboration tools, and also online videos. Now, cloud-based collaboration tools and online videos had been showing some very high levels of usage prior to school closures as well, but we even saw significant increases in those types of tools teachers were using in the classroom. As a result of that increased access and the increased utilization, we also noticed within our data shifts in terms of teachers' interest in the types of professional development that they needed. Every year on the Speak Up survey, we ask teachers for their wish list for professional development. What do they think they need more training in? So looking at the data specifically from teachers during the school closure period was really interesting because we saw that they were much more interested in understanding how to implement new learning environments as a result of the experience that they had. So we saw, for example, a 120% increase in teachers saying they want to learn how to teach an online class. We also saw increases in the use of social media to communicate with parents and students, how to create my own videos, and as well as how to facilitate an online discussion forum or a blended or flipped classroom. Now, one of the other things that we noticed in our data was an increase in student-teacher communications. Chris mentioned the importance of that. And we actually saw, as a result of school closures and the use of digital tools outside of school, that students, as well as teachers and parents, all agreed that students were communicating more during this time period with their teachers than they ever had been before. Now, that's significant for a couple different reasons, because it opens up a conversation, and maybe you've already asked this question or you're starting to ask this question. What tools were the students using for that increased communications? But at this point, I want to learn a little bit more about our audience here. So we have a poll question for you. EdWeb friends, let's go ahead and start this poll. So what tool did you use most often over the past 7 months for your two-way communication with family, friends, and colleagues? Was it email? Was it the traditional phone call, a social media post, text messages, video conferencing? We'll give you a moment here, folks, to share with us what your insights were about the types of tools you used, and then we'll take a look at what students told us in terms of the usage of the tools that they had available to them. So we see some good data coming in here. We'll give it just another 30 seconds or so. It looks like right now video conferencing is pretty popular. I think many of us got much more familiar with some of the video conferencing tools that were out there. All right, great. EdWeb friends, let's go ahead and close the poll down at this point. And it did look like that video conferencing was the most popular here for our audience that is here today. Now, we asked students about the types of tools they were using, and we were surprised to see an increase in texting between students and teachers. And let me just give you a little bit of background on this because it might be interesting for you. In 2015, only 14% of teachers told us that they were texting, sending text messages to communicate with their students. We did not see any difference in that data in 2016, 17, 18, or 19, or the beginning of this school year, the 1920 school year. Now, teachers were using text messaging for communications with their colleagues and starting to do it more with parents. But what was fascinating to us is that during the school closures and the remote e-learning time period, we saw a dramatic increase in students texting with their teachers as a mode of communications. So as you can see here, 62% of middle school students told us that they were now regularly using text messaging to communicate with their teachers. Prior to school closures, only a quarter of those middle school students said that was a regular part of their learning experience. A similar type amount of increase between high school students from before and after as well. Now, this was a really interesting statistic for us emerging from the Speak Up research for a very interesting reason. I would love to say that we had some forethought. We did not. That we had some crystal ball that we looked into back in 2015. But in 2015, we asked students across the country, what do you think school will look like in 2020? I pulled out for you this one comment from a 6th grade girl in Maryland. And again, this comment was reported by her in 2015. She said, in 2020, there will be many more educational videos, online class discussions, online games, texting from teachers, or other ways for students and teachers to communicate online. Everyone would have their own tablet or laptop. She goes on to say, this is what the school of the future looks like in my head. Everything will be online and everyone would learn more. How interesting that we ended up with almost actuating many of what was her prophecy back in 2015 because of the pandemic and the sudden shift to digital learning. It's more interesting to me as we start to think about the future. What would students today say school is going to look like next year, the year after, and maybe even 5 years from now? This gets to this point of the value associated with listening to our students as they are not only using these digital tools, but thinking about the best utilization of those tools to support their learning. So with that now, we're going to turn over to talk to our students, our panel of students for a little bit. And I have some very particular questions that I want to ask them. Now, remember, folks, you're going to have the opportunity to ask the students some questions as well. So in that question mark at the top of your screen, you can start putting the questions in there now. And when we get to the Q&A time, we'll be going through those. But let me once again have our students introduce themselves. And then after they do that, Ed Webb, then we'll turn down the slides. But let's have them first introduce themselves to each one of us before we get into the discussion. So Hikari, I'm going to start with you.
I'm Hikari, and I'm representing the Albemarle County Public Schools, and I'm in 7th grade.
Wonderful to have you here, Hikari. Okay, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm in grade 8 at Charles R. Drew Middle School in Talladega County, Alabama.
Wonderful to have you here also, Sarah. I'm going to jump now over to Kellen. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kellen, and I'm currently a junior at San Marcos High School down in San Diego, California.
Nice to have you here, Kellen. And then Olivia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Olivia. I'm from El Paso, Texas, and I'm currently a senior at Beller High School. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful to have you here also. Okay, students, I've got a couple questions for you. As you know, I'm not going to call on anybody individually, so if you have a response to my question, just give me a little wave and I'll call on you specifically. So here's my first question. I shared some of the data statistics from the Speak Up research, which obviously encompassed schools all across the country. We had over 100,000 students that participated in Speak Up last year. But what I'd like to hear is a little bit about what your experience has been. So what types of technology, online tools, digital tools, types of resources do you use to support learning as part of your school experience? Go ahead, Olivia.
I think that social media is a great tool for students. I think it's something that we're familiar with, we're comfortable with. I think there are a lot of students that are just learning how to use email. I think adults find that kind of funny, but just a few years ago, I learned how to use email. I'm still pretty new to it. I'm kind of confused on how to forward things and copy people. So having platforms like Twitter and Instagram have been really helpful for me just because it has that familiarity.
That's really interesting. I think many of us are probably chuckling with the idea that our students are learning how to use email. Thank you, Olivia. Kellen, jump in.
I was going to add on, I had a few teachers in my school who just created teacher Instagram accounts. So instead of having a personal Instagram account, they had their own like chemistry Instagram account that their students would follow. So it was professional and it was for education based, but it was a new platform to use that was more engaging for the students.
Did you find, Kellen, that your teachers were comfortable in those tools, or did they need some support in using those?
I'm not going to lie. It was the younger teachers who were using the Instagram accounts. It wasn't one of the older teachers on campus, but I do think that if we were able to give us some type of video or training system, I think that would help a lot of students stay engaged. Interesting.
Go ahead, Sarah.
In Talladega County, we use STEM as a big part of what we do. So all parts of G Suite, like Gmail, Docs, Sheets, we incorporate a lot into our learning to organize ourselves.
Sarah, just as a follow-up question, have you found that those type of tools make you more productive as a learner, do you think?
They do make us more productive as we team build, because you can share docs and sheets with one another. It allows us to work now, even in the pandemic, where we can still communicate.
Great, wonderful. Okay, so I've got another question for you. So treeing off, this is a great way that we're getting started here. Think about, and you can think about it from last year or you can think about it from this year. Think about an experience you had where you think technology was used really effectively to help you with learning in a way that was different than if you were physically in a classroom from a learning experience. Can you think of any sort of a particular class or a project or an assignment where those digital tools really made the difference in the learning experience for you? Kellen?
So adding on to what Sarah had said, with G Suite, there is a new Google platform that is known as Jamboard, which is basically a virtual whiteboard. And I've seen it on my G Suite platform, but my teachers have never used it until we went to a virtual format. And having a virtual whiteboard was really, really cool to add on our own ideas. So you can have like Post-it notes and your own ideas onto one shared whiteboard. You also could change the pictures, add your own pictures, add audio. And that was a really cool virtual way of sharing ideas without having to speak. And I think a lot of students have a hard time with unmuting themselves and participating in class. So I think having a virtual whiteboard was a really cool opportunity.
So that's really interesting, Kellen. Quite often when I'm talking with students, and I do focus groups with students all the time, even through school closures, I was doing focus groups with students, that multi-modality, so the idea of using different types of, whether it is audio and video or text, was something that was really important to a lot of students. Do any of you find that those types of learning experiences where you can use different types of content or different modes of communication is more engaging than others? Go ahead, Sarah.
The collaboration feature on Nearpod, where you can all type in your responses, reply with pictures or answers, that allows us to collaborate as well without having to individually share our thoughts.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Kellen?
Additionally to Nearpod, there's also a program called Pear Deck, which allows students to draw and use polls and allows teachers to go with the Google slide presentation. But it makes it, again, very engaging for those students.
Good. Nice input. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. Quite often we come across conversations where people say, I love using technology for learning, and I'm not so crazy about technology for learning. So from your perspective, from your experiences, or from the experiences of your classmates, what do you like or dislike about using technology as part of your learning world? Olivia?
I think that a great benefit to having to using technology with my work is that I always have it on my computer, especially with Drive. You don't have those instances where teachers are like, sorry, I lost your homework, and then you have to do the assignment again. So I think that's really beneficial. You can always make copies if you need to. You can reference some of your work from past years, same topic, just another class, another year. I still have that information with me, and I think that's really neat.
That's almost like a portfolio, of your work that you can then reference back to. Do you find that you reference back to things that you had done previously, Olivia?
I do, actually. Just recently this year, one of my teachers for my entrepreneurship class, we did a presentation on our personality type, and I had to do that assignment for English my sophomore year. And of course, I took the quiz again to make sure that I was the same personality type. But yeah, it was really helpful because I already had all of that information, all of those notes that I had, formulated myself, that I had put together, and I could just reference to that. So made my life a little bit easier.
Yeah, nice, efficient learning. Hikari, I think you had raised your hand.
Well, honestly, for me, technology makes my learning easier because, I have, a lot of computers, a lot of technology at my home, and, throughout the years, I really had to learn, so, it's easier for me, but I understand for those, people that don't have, as much technology as me, because, they need to, learn how to use technology and also learn, school-wise, and yeah. it could be like a little difficult.
Could be a little challenging. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Sarah, jump in.
Adding on to what Olivia was saying, it does make technology easier accessible when you're dealing with more technology, as you can refer to what you did in the past.
I love that. I love that aspect of taking advantage of a whole collection of learning, not just what you learned today or yesterday, but actually having access to all of that. One last question before, oh, sorry, Kellen, jump in.
I was going to just quickly add that with technology being so prevalent in our lives, I have realized that I've been getting more headaches with looking at technology and looking at screens. I actually had to buy blue light glasses for my eyes so that I wasn't straining my eyes every single day. So sometimes when I get the opportunity to do like math homework, when I can actually write it on myself and take a picture of it and upload it, I think that is a great opportunity for me to like get away from the computer. So I would encourage some teachers, if they can, to also allow the curriculum to be taught in a traditional style instead of being online.
That's a really good point, Kellen. Thank you so much for bringing that up. We know that we all have different approaches to the way we do learning or think about learning. And so being accommodating of everyone's needs is something that's really valuable. And I love that you have that awareness, Kellen, of the need to balance what types of access that you have as well. So one last question before we then move back into the data for a couple of minutes. Do you use technology outside of school on your own to help you with any learning that isn't part of schoolwork? Do you do some learning outside of school that's enabled by technology that might be interesting? Go ahead, Sarah.
I've been interested in the stock market for a little bit. So around this summer, I got into the foreign exchange market. And as we use things like Google Calendar and G Suite, it helps me stay organized. And I also plan my trades in using Google Sheets as well.
Wow. For our audience, let's remember that Sarah's an 8th grader. So how's the stock trading going? Sarah, are you up? Are you?
Right now, I'm up $2 from a 10-cent trade I put in this morning in the AUD GPB pair.
That's fabulous. Okay, folks, after the congressional briefing, we can then talk about some stock tips that Sarah may have for all of us that we want to take advantage of. That would be fun. Thanks, Sarah. Anybody else do something outside of school using technology for some learning? Kellen?
So I'm super involved in student leadership, and in California, we have the Association of Student Leaders, which is about 24 students throughout the state that are represented by each city. And we are on Zoom constantly. And a different thing about them is that we use Microsoft apps instead of Google apps. So I've had to learn how to use both different platforms, using Outlook for mail and Microsoft To Do instead of using Gmail and other Google Suite. So I think that has been a good way for me to kind of diversify my technological, skills.
That's right. I think that is a good idea so that you have sort of both sets of skills going forward and you're prepared for that. Great. All right, panel, hold on. I'm going to share the second part of our national data findings, and then we're going to come back and have the second part of our conversation. So let's get back into this part of it. If you remember, I said there was 2 parts to this. The second part was the looking forward part. So what does the Speak Up research reveal about potential emerging education transformation? This is about moving beyond the change that we saw taking place during the spring to really thinking about the lessons learned and what does that mean in terms of our thoughts about how do we improve education? How do we make it more equitable? How do we make it a better learning environment for students? So it's a little bit about thinking about transformation or metamorphosis in terms of looking at what that means going forward. And in particular, what we were able to pull out of the Speak Up research were some changed or evolving beliefs and value sets on the part of the different stakeholders. We know that when we talk about transformation, it's important not just to talk about what changes are happening, but really about what do people feel about those? What are their attitudes? What do they believe to be true? And so we're going to now take a look at some new beliefs and values that may propel us into new ways of thinking about learning. So a couple interesting things that we learned through the experience in the spring, and in particular from teachers and parents. We definitely saw that whereas many teachers had previously thought of technology exclusively as a tool for student engagement, which it definitely has that role, now we've suddenly found with the sudden shift to digital learning, technology was the learning platform. It wasn't just about motivating students to stay longer in a particular task or retain a certain amount of information. It actually was the delivery mechanism. We also saw that as a result of the teachers' increased experience using technology, particularly digital content, it actually helped teachers become better informed about what constitutes quality in that digital content and also what they wanted to see in the products for usage in the classroom. Now, that doesn't say that they weren't a good consumer before. It just means that we saw an elevated level of sophistication on the part of the teachers. We also noticed in our data that while parents had always been very interested in the role of technology to personalize learning for their child, that the experience from the spring actually resulted in even a heightened level of that type of experience desired by the parents. And then we talked a little bit about communication tools. We also saw that the digital tools added value to parents in terms of that increased communication with their child's teacher, and also greater transparency, which we thought were really some interesting findings. So let me give you a couple additional examples of this, just to lay the groundwork for our follow-on conversation with our students. So starting with teachers, one of the things that we thought was particularly interesting, and again, I'm giving you comparative data from before school closures and after school closures, is that we saw that the way that teachers articulated the benefits of using technology evolved as well through this experience. So teachers were more likely, as an after effect of the school closure experience, to say that they were creating more interactive and relevant lessons. They were facilitating more student-centered learning, and that they were more aware of individual student strengths and support needs. We thought that was particularly interesting because we also heard that from students, that they felt that their teachers had a greater more personalized understanding of what they needed to be successful. We also saw that teachers' appreciation for online learning shifted as a result of this experience. Prior to school closures, only a little bit more than a third of teachers had said that they thought online classes should be part of any future-ready schools or ultimate schools of the future. As a result of the experience in the spring, now a majority of teachers say that that should be something that's included in planning for new schools. And from the parent side of things, we also saw some shifts or some changes in parents' valuation. And this one was also particularly interesting. And let me explain the data here that I'm sharing with you. We are again comparing the beginning of the school year, and again, that was September to early March, with the period of the last 2 weeks in March, April, May, and June. But I also pulled into this conversation what we had learned from parents from the previous school year, because we saw a lot of consistency initially. So the fact that the parents felt that my child communicates more with their teachers was pretty consistent. About a third of parents felt that was true in the 2018-19 school year, as well as the beginning of last school year. But that then jumped to 53% of parents felt that was the case. Parents also were really embracing the idea of the personalization of the learning process for their child. Their child had the ability to learn at their own pace. They were learning in a way that best fit their own needs. And that also led to this other key finding from the Speak Up research this year, is that parents are much more supportive of the value of effective technology use in supporting their child's future success. And this goes to two key elements. One has to do with that effective use of technology, and also the tying it in with their student being prepared, their child being prepared for college, for career, for the workplace, for citizenry. So we saw, for example, prior to school closures, 55% of parents said it was very important that technology was used effectively within their child's learning life. That jumped to 75% of parents. Parents gained a much greater awareness of the learning experience as facilitated by technology than even what they had realized they would. That's not to say that parents weren't familiar previously. It's just that in many cases, their perceptions changed. I've got a couple examples here for you. Because of the fact that parents were now playing, in many cases, the role of a co-teacher or the support teacher at home during remote learning, they gained a much greater appreciation not only of the use of technology within their child's learning life, but actually about the education process. And we think that that's a pretty dramatic change that can influence the way we think about schools, and in particular about school-to-home engagement and communications. So we found that, for example, an increase in the number of parents that said technology was used effectively by their child's teacher to support learning. The other things that we saw were a little bit surprising. We had, prior to school closures, 68% of parents said that they were very comfortable helping their child with digital homework. In fact, after they were in that position of needing to actively sit elbow to elbow with their child, helping them with that digitally homework, actually the percentage of parents that agreed with that declined. I think that parents learned this was maybe a little bit more complicated than what maybe they were prepared for initially. Also, the same thing we saw in terms of a decrease in parents feeling that they were comfortable helping their child learn good digital citizenship skills, and also their confidence even in being able to model good digital citizenship skills. So a change in perception that I think is really interesting for school and district leaders to take into consideration. Now what I want to do is talk a little bit about what we learned from the students themselves about the types of learning experiences that they think is most valuable. Now, again, I'm going to share the national research, and then we're going to have the conversation with our own panel of experts that are here with us today. Whereas from the teachers and the parents, we saw some pretty significant changes in their beliefs and values about digital learning, we actually saw consistency in the student perspective. So we did not see dramatic changes in the way students were thinking about technology use or even their preferred educational experiences as a result of the spring experience. Now, as adults, we always look at things through our own lenses. And so for many teachers I've talked to, for many administrators I've talked to, who looked at this and said, well, this was a totally different learning experience. There were so many changes that we went through. They may be missing the part of this because they're not using the right lens, that for these students, in many cases, this was already addressing their preferred learning style. So we see, for example, students' valuation on the importance of school did not change from pre-school closures to during school closures. 49% of students in both environments said the best learning experiences involve solving real-world problems. Students like to learn how to do things. They like learning about new ideas. That did not change. Students also told us, 50% of students, middle school and high school students, said that the use of digital tools helps them develop a greater sense of personal ownership of the learning process. That was exactly the same before school closures and after school closures. I asked the students about their use of tools outside of school to support some self-directed learning, and we learned that Sarah is playing in the stock market, which is really interesting, and we learned that Kellen is using digital tools to support his school leadership passion. We find that students are using digital tools outside of school, not teacher-supported, not teacher-sponsored, not a homework assignment, in many, many different ways. They're watching videos to learn how to do things. They're using social media. We talked about social media before. They're using voice-enabled assistants such as Siri and Alexa to answer questions. And they're also playing games and watching others play games as a way to develop skills. We thought that was particularly interesting, and so we did a deeper probe into the types of skills that students say they're developing as the result of their gameplay around learning. And so this idea of effective decision-making, the idea about learning collaboration skills, critical thinking and problem-solving skills, and then also even just the use of technology were all skills that students said were important for them to learn. We also learned from the students that they are increasingly thinking about digital tools as a way to support some new learning experiences. So again, not just about the engagement component, but actually increasing effectiveness and productivity, which our panel has already talked about. So we saw increases from 2018-19 to 2019-20 in terms of students saying their preference for reading is on a screen versus a printed article or a hard copy book. We also saw that students, a majority of students now say they learn more from watching a video than reading a book. I know it hurts all the librarians who might be with us today to hear that. And then also this idea of they would like learning in an online class. So students came into the 1920 school year with actually a heightened interest in online learning, even from the previous year before. And then just as where Olivia started us off by talking about social media, we now saw that students in middle school and high school wish their teachers and schools used more social media to effectively communicate with them. These are tools that students are using outside of school. So whether it is Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, or even YouTube, the students were interested in that type of a modality to enhance their learning experience as well. Okay, we're going to go back to our panel now. So Ed Webb, we can shut down the screen at this point so we can see all of our students. I'm going to get my new list of questions. I hope folks are putting questions in because we're getting close to the time period when we are going to see what questions you have for them. So I would love to hear from the students. So what types of learning experiences are the most engaging for you? If you could design the ultimate school, what type of learning experiences would you like to see as part of your daily school activities? Olivia.
I think that it's important to teach real life skills to our students. And this is me thinking, you know, after COVID, after all of this, everything's back to normal, fingers crossed. I think ideally we need to incorporate more of those real life skills, such as, learning how to do taxes, car maintenance. I don't know how to cook that well still, and I'm going to be 18 soon, and that's really scary. So, things like that I think are really important. And, maybe we can use technology to help inform and educate our students on things like that. That's something that's really important to me. But also I think real life experiences. I do think that we push students to decide their careers and futures a little too soon. Just me personally speaking, but I think it's okay. I think it's okay to think and to start thinking. Maybe not, formulate your decision that'll last, forever and ever. But let's say I want to be a lawyer. So I go to a school and they provide me an opportunity to shadow an actual attorney. And then I realize, you know what? This is kind of stressful. I don't think I can do this. I saved my parents a lot of money. And, now I know that's something that I'm not passionate about and I can move on to something else. I think that would be, really, really beneficial.
Thank you so much. I think that you're speaking obviously from the perspective of someone who is going to be graduating from high school this year. And so I can see where these things are like top of mind for you in terms of whether you're prepared or not. So thank you, Olivia. Kellen, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah. First, I was going to say that I think it's, again, really important to have a variety of different tools and platforms that we use to learn, not staying on one platform, staying on like Google Classroom, but also using like the Jamboard, but also like Pear Deck and Nearpod, and using those various platforms to keep students engaged. Additionally, I would love to see, in a perfect world, to have more discussions with our teachers and classmates regarding the issues that are going on in our world right now. I think teaching the importance of having civil disagreements is super important, and learning how to have disagreements with someone else and like sharing your opinions and your ideas in a classroom setting is super important. Last year, for the first time, I had a Black teacher, so I had someone that looked like me, and we had discussions that were so impactful on every student, no matter the color of their skin. And it was so impactful for me and every student to see that it's okay to be friends with someone who has different opinions than you. And we were taught how to have those discussions respectfully. So I think that could be something that we could also try to impact and bring into our campuses.
Kellen, that is so fascinating in terms of, you're absolutely right. We maybe are not doing as good a job in terms of teaching skills around civil discourse and how to have disagreements respectfully, but to value other folks' opinions. I've got a follow-up question for you, Kellen. Do you think that's why, if you do, tell me why, do you think that schools are reluctant to have these conversations? Because obviously so many issues came up over the spring and in through the summertime, but do you think that schools are reluctant, and do you have an idea of why they might be reluctant to have these conversations?
I always discuss this with my friends and kind of we try to understand why. I don't know. It was weird. I think I had not had a conversation on a school campus before until I had that Black teacher. I think him being a Black teacher, being one of the only ones on our campuses, I think that allowed him to feel like he needed to have those discussions. I don't think it was discouraged by our administrators or anything like that. I just don't think it's encouraged to be discussed, if that makes sense. So I don't think it was either encouraged or discouraged. It just wasn't really. I think it's like a touchy subject, and like schools obviously aren't really supposed to have any opinions and show biases towards certain people. So I think that it comes down. I think there's some preset issues that stop administrators and leaders to have the discussions, but I really do think that the class environment as a whole was so much more inclusive and understanding of each other.
That's great. I'm glad you had that experience, Kellen. Anyone else in terms of what type of learning experiences? Go ahead, Hikari.
Well, yeah, in my AVID class, I have a lot of discussions, and it's called a Socratic seminar, and we talk about things, and the one we just did a week ago was if students should turn on their cameras, and I could understand now I was people students should, because they should, but then this made me understand that some students just feel uncomfortable, or they still haven't they just feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. This is a new area in terms of how we're interacting with each other virtually. And so it's going to take some time for people to feel comfortable and also to learn the skills associated with this. Sarah?
To add on to what Olivia said, I think that students should be introduced earlier if they have their mind made up on what they want to do, or if they're interested in a subject. It would be a class to where you dedicate a semester to learning about the subject, to figure out before you get to the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade what you want to do with your life.
Wonderful. I love that idea. Go ahead, Kellen, jump back in.
Adding on to that, but also teaching that it's okay if you don't have your mind made up yet, that's okay too. But for students who do, I think that'd be a great opportunity.
Yeah. So again, that idea of customizing the learning process to what students need. Follow-on question, and then folks, we're going to go to our audience and see if they have some questions. What is it about, when you think about the use of technology, Do you think that it could be better used within the learning environments? Do you have some examples or some advice for your school or your district or even the governor of your state in terms of better ways that technology could be used? Go ahead, Olivia, start us off.
I think that it is crucial that we provide mental health resources for not only our students, but our teachers and staff as well. With COVID-19, there has been a rise in anxiety and depression, especially with teens and members of the LGBTQ plus community. And I don't think we can ignore that. I don't think we should ignore that. The other day on the news, I saw a really alarming statistic saying that more than half of 11 to 17-year-olds have thoughts of suicide or self-harm. And I think we can use technology to, to help people in need. And again, like I said, teachers as well. I think teachers feel that they have to be strong for their students. They have to, carry all this weight, carry all of the problems of their students, and, we have to take care of them too.
Absolutely. We've seen a huge increase in district administrators. I know we have lots of district administrators that are with us today that have been telling us that they are more concerned this year than ever before about staff morale and staff mental health. So thank you for bringing that up. And I agree with you, Olivia. I think that there are other ways in which we can utilize these technology tools that we're using to reach out and to establish connections with folks. Kellen, I know your hand was up, but I think Sarah's hand was up first, right? Sarah, jump in and then Kellen. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Here in Talladega County, we focus on the individuality, especially in virtual learning, as having a one-on-one connection, as everyone having a Chromebook. And here in Talladega County, we have where our school buses have Wi-Fi connection. You can have hotspots delivered to your home to give a more equal opportunity in learning, which I think all school districts should have.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for bringing up that point, Sarah, about the fact that, as Commissioner Rosenworcel did, not every student has access outside of school, and that was obviously impacting their learning capability. Kellen?
Yeah, I was going to go back to Olivia's point about mental health. I think a really cool thing that our district just started this year was putting in place a mandatory advisory period, which is a 30-minute period in the middle of the day, which allowed for, it wasn't anything regarding like actual education with curriculum or anything like that. It was about 20 students for every teacher. We have so many students in our district, but hopefully you can get less. But about 20 students in each Zoom meeting with a teacher, and there was just separate discussions and separate activities to do that had nothing to do with school in particular, allowed for students to just talk to an adult and just to talk with someone, not as like a teacher or not as like a student, just as like a friend and someone to ask questions about in the real life. And I think even though some students don't see the true reason behind it, I think even if we're hitting 1 or 2 students, that's making a really big difference in our campuses.
That sounds like a wonderful program. I think that's fabulous that San Marcos has instituted that. Do you think it's made a difference, Kellen? I mean, do you think it's had a positive impact?
I think it has. I think that the situation that comes up with it is it's just an extra Zoom meeting to go to in the middle of the day. So you already have so many classes to go to for Zoom, and now you're having to go to another mandatory Zoom meeting. And I think that is where some students kind of don't have negative feelings towards it. But even if they don't even attend it, the kids who are attending are getting something out of it for the most part. So I think it's hitting someone in some way.
That's great. Thank you. Sarah, did you want to add into this?
Exactly. Especially with students that do all virtual, it's kind of like yourself. You're at home and you don't really get that social interaction that school gives a lot of students. I would recommend as doing like a personal phone call or whether it's a text message, something that's more informal and casual to make the students and teachers feel like they are still important, even though you are at home.
That's great. I love that. I actually had a conversation just a couple of weeks ago with some teachers that saying that they were actually making home visits. So they weren't coming into the student's home, but they were coming up to like the front porch or on the sidewalk, just so that they could have a one-on-one conversation with their student and check in on them. And it made them feel good. It made the student feel good that there was still that connection. Panel, you have just been all fabulous. I'm going to now see if we can get back to the slideshow, my EdWeb friends, because we want to move on now to the Q&A part of this. Thank you so much. So we took a look at what happened during the spring through our rear view mirror. I saw that elephant looming in the mirror. We also took a look at is there some evidence of something changing, something transforming that we can latch on to and use that as our opportunity going forward. So we want to now open it up to the Q&A with the audience, but I do want to give you all this call to action. I want you to take into account not just what we are experiencing and what we are learning, and we had some wonderful insights from our students here today, but what does that mean going forward? And it goes back to what Chris and I were talking about at the beginning of our program, this idea of making what we are learning actionable. So how does this then impact the way we are doing things differently in our schools? Not just in the short term of a structural difference, we're in a hybrid learning environment, we're fully virtual, we're back face-to-face, but what does it mean in terms of actually looking at the learning experiences and environments for students? So keep that in mind. With this now, we will go into our Q&A part of this, and let's see if we have some questions here that we can pose to our audience. So I see a number of questions here. We'll skim them. Oh, we have lots of questions. We'll have to see how far we get into this. So I'm just going to, since we have so many, I'm just going to jump around here a little bit. So I've got a question here from a name I recognize, my good friend Al Byers. So Dr. Byers says, how comfortable do you feel your teachers are in creating dynamic online learning that's engaging beside reading, completing workshops, or writing assignments? So students, what do you think about in terms of your teacher's skill or their comfort level in creating some engaging or dynamic online learning? Go ahead, Kellen, jump in.
I think some of my teachers are a little bit overwhelmed and stressed with their newfound, occupation and doing much more than just teaching. I think every single day I would get onto my history Zoom call and my teacher's like, uh-oh, like the district changed a new thing. I got to learn something else new again. And I think that type of mentality is, especially when the teacher kind of shows it to the students, is discouraging for the students and the teacher. So I think if the district offices can start providing more opportunity, resources, I guess, for students and for teachers who are not as comfortable with learning how to lead a Zoom and all of that with it, I think that'd be helpful. So more resources from the district office level.
So you do agree that your teachers need some additional support, which I think the teachers would say as well, that they need additional support.
Because if they're doing more than teaching, I mean, even with the mental health, that is another aspect of their teaching job that probably wasn't what they were planning on doing when they first became a teacher. So, but it's so important and it's necessary. So I think there needs to be more resources coming from the district office.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kellen. Anyone else from our student panel? How comfortable are your teachers? What do you think they might need? Olivia?
I think this year I don't want to say they're older. I have a group of older teachers, and I think it's harder for them to connect with forms of technology. I was hearing from the other students all these really fun and exciting, sounds like it, tools. I heard one called Nearpod and a bunch of them. You guys were naming all of them. And I really haven't had any experiences with any of them. I'm supposed to be the expert and I don't know anything. But I think, not only providing those resources for our teachers, but making sure they understand how to use them. Because if you don't know how to do something, you're not going to be inclined to use it. I've definitely been using a lot of Google Slides, which I'm okay with because, again, I'm comfortable with it. But I would really like to be pushed outside of, my comfort zone as well as my teachers. But of course, they need that help.
Thank you, Olivia. So I've got another question that I noticed in our question list. We have a great audience here today. Let me just say congratulations to the audience. These are all brilliant questions. So students, thinking back to what your experience was in the spring or even going forward into the fall, what is something that you miss about your being physically in the classroom with a teacher? Is there something in particular that you miss? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, do you have any suggestions for how whatever it is that you miss from that experience could be better replicated in an online, virtual, or hybrid environment? Go ahead, Sarah.
Getting instant validation from like a teacher, whether I can raise my hand, ask a question, that's really good to me. And so when I'm outside of school, it would be great if there was like a call-in where you could call and ask a teacher from around the world. Sometimes it'd be 11 p.m. and you have to turn in an assignment at 12 and you're just like, I need help. I don't want to contact my teacher at 11 p.m. And so if that was a resource that could be integrated into the classroom, that'd be great.
That's really interesting, Sarah. One of the other questions we have on the Speak Up survey, and I know that our students, many of them complete a Speak Up survey as part of their, because their school districts participate, but we asked students, what type of technology would you like to see in the ultimate school going forward? And actually, Sarah, it's so profound because one of the things that we saw a dramatic increase in was students wanting to have access to online tutors that they could contact anytime to be able to ask a question. So I think that's really interesting. Something else that somebody missed. Did I see another hand go up and a suggestion? Go ahead, Kellen.
I think the whole idea of when in person you would go to a classroom and you'd be talking with your classmates, laughing, and like the whole communication's happening when you walk in, and then your teacher's like, okay guys, be quiet. That does not happen on a Zoom call. You come in muted already, so it's automatically not an awkward environment, but it's just a very quiet environment. And I think that's hard for students who like to just come in and like who are used to talking and stuff. So I think one main change that one of my teachers have done is they play music every day when we come into the Zoom room. So they give us a form at the beginning of the week to give in music that we want to hear throughout the week. And then each time we come to the Zoom room, there's already music playing. And even if your video's off and you're muted, there's just music you can sing along to in your head. And that already creates an environment where people feel more comfortable with talking and participating.
That's really interesting, Kellen. I think that we're all still learning, right? How to facilitate communications, how to set up a good school climate in this type of virtual environment. And so I love suggestions such as that, because that may be something that some other teachers or administrators that are with us hadn't thought about. And so you have the opportunity to share that as well. So another question for our esteemed panel here. When you think about the fact that you have lots of ideas, I'm sure that you have ideas about how school could be improved, how technology could be used better. I asked you that question before, maybe about things from a learning experience that you'd like to see differently. We talked about that. Do you feel that there is an opportunity in your school, in your district, in your community for you to have voice into that conversation? Is there a way for you to share your ideas with people that are making those type of decisions? And go ahead, Sarah.
As Kellen said earlier, my school has what we call character council as well, which is a group of student leaders. We have monthly meetings, sometimes several times a month. And sometimes we have people on Zoom and in real person, but we collaborate our ideas as we have upcoming events or we have a problem in our school.
Good, great. Thank you for sharing that. Kellen?
Yeah, on my campus, we have a council called PAC, which is the Principal Advisory Committee, which is comprised of students from not just student council, but also captains of a sports team, leaders in robotics club, students from all around, from band. I mean, students from all around the campus who come together once a month to share their concerns, what they want to see changed on campus, even in a virtual format. We're doing those meetings on Zoom, and those are starting for us next month. We're going to have those meetings with our principal to start having discussions and talking about what students would like to see changed on campus.
Oh, I love that too. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. All right, folks, I have one more question. Again, as the moderator, I take the privilege of having the last question for our panel. So here's the question. I shared that quote that was from 2015, if you remember that, the sixth grade student from Maryland, talking about what school was going to look like in 2020. So I'm not going to ask you to predict 5 years in the future, but let's roll ahead 1 year, okay? So 1 year from now, how is school going to look different? Let's assume that we have a vaccine that's working for everyone, so that the COVID part of this we'll put to the side. Will school be different for you a year from now? And what do you think that learning experience might look like a year from now? Olivia?
While I think we can all agree that technology is a super tool that is helping us tremendously right now, I want to make sure that we always have that aspect of communication. And I think that's what we're really missing right now, is being able to properly communicate and have that human interaction. You know, I've been seeing things saying that our generation is awkward. We can't converse as well as, you know, older generations because we're on our phones more. We're used to texting and we don't like doing things in person. And, you know, personally, I love in person. Technology has always kind of scared me. I'm definitely getting more comfortable with it, especially this year. But I think if we can merge them together, that would be great, because I don't want it to be all online. I don't think anyone wants that. While maybe, you know, yeah, it could save money because then we wouldn't have to pay for the bills and the facilities, then let's not even have school. You know what I mean? I think it's important for us to make sure that we have that interaction, because that's what makes us human at the end of the day.
Beautifully said, Olivia. Thank you so very much. I think that that's, no matter what we're thinking about for the future, this idea of keeping the humanistic side of this front and center is obviously very important. And I like your idea about, well, how do we leverage these technologies, merge these type of environments together more effectively? So thank you for sharing that. The rest of our panel, some thoughts about what learning or school might look like a year from now? Sarah?
I think because so many people are virtual, I think in the future, homeschooling is going to be a lot more normalized. Because before, when you think of homeschooling, you think no friends, you're just alone all the time with your parents. But I think it's going to be a lot more normalized, and some people may learn better this way. So it's going to definitely expand the homeschooling community.
I think that's really interesting. It's this idea of different types of learning models best meeting the needs of particular students, right? Hey, Carrie, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I agree with Olivia that we should like merge, because I mean, it's like really hard to just like be in the computer all day, and like we're technically like doing this, and like our assignments and everything are like in the computer, but like Fridays in my school we have like clubs that we just like hang out and like talk about like different stuff. And I think like if we don't have COVID anymore, we could actually like have clubs like we could actually be like in person in like a place. It would like be much more helpful because it's just kind of weird. Yeah.
You summed it up beautifully, Hikari. It is a little weird, but you are such troopers for being pioneers in this new learning experience and sharing your insights with us. Kellen, I'm going to give you the last word for this question today.
I think it's become apparently clear that all of us, the students, are in charge of our own learning. And I think that was always said beforehand, but now it's really true that we're in charge of our own learning completely. We choose if we wanted to join the Zoom call. Maybe it's for attendance, but either way, you don't have to have your video on possibly. And it just has made that new era of really to make every decision you make in this virtual format is affecting your later life and everything going on. So I think that has become a really apparent skill that needs to be understood and emphasized to all of our students, that they're in charge of their own learning. And I think in the future, this is going to be more of a skill that is going to be taught to all students.
I agree with you 100%, Kellen. In fact, I just finished writing a paper about student ownership of learning and looking at some of our data findings from Speak Up. I'll make sure I send it to you, Kellen, so you can give me your opinion on whether I captured that correctly. But you're right. I mean, students have always had control, shall we say, to some extent, or at least over the destiny of their educational paths. But that is much more heightened. And we need to make sure that we're being respectful of that, and also making sure that we're providing students with the skills that they need to make the right decisions and to understand the context of all of that. Well, thank you very much, panel. We're going to do what Kellen's been doing, which is, I think, this, right? In terms of approval of all of your comments and your thoughts. And thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I have a few housekeeping items to clear us out here today before we all say goodbye and move on. If you are interested in learning more about the Speak Up Research Project or some of our other resources that we have available, we have two ways for you to do that. You can come visit us at our website at tomorrow.org. We always put up a pretty extensive collection of Speak Up reports and infographics. Some of the reports that we have, in addition to our national report here, is that we're just completing a series called 90 Days That Changed K-12 Teaching and Learning. Those are a series of 4 executive briefs. The one I just referenced about student ownership is the 4th one in that series. I hope that you'll take advantage of looking at all 4 of those. In addition to that, we also created a series of infographics this year that I also want to point your attention to. One is about teachers' wish list for professional development for this school year based on the experience they had last year. It's almost like a roadmap in terms of what teachers need. So I hope that our district and school leaders will take advantage of that. And then we also did a very special 2-part series, infographics, comparing students in majority minority schools with students in majority white schools in terms of their access to technology, differences in their access to technology, and also their social, emotional, and mental health in those 2 sets of schools, a really important part of work. Now, those resources that I just mentioned to you are actually in the resource section of today, and they'll be part of the archived library. So you can access them there, or you can come visit us at tomorrow.org. In addition to that, if the data that I shared with you today was interesting and you're starting to think about, I wonder what my students would say, I wonder what my teachers would say, I wonder what my parents would say about any particular question, of course, you have the invitation to participate with us in the Speak Up Research Project. Every K-12 school or district, public, private, parochial, charter, magnet schools, fully virtual schools, whatever school format you're in, are eligible to participate. Our online surveys will open in November. They'll be open through the end of June. You can pick whichever surveys you want to use, whether that's for the students, the parents, the teachers, the administrators. We provide back to you all of your localized data as well as comparative valid data to help you make decisions about your plans and programs going forward. You can learn more about that at our website. I do want to thank our fabulous sponsors again, my good friends that are here with me from Blackboard. Thank you, Chris, so much for being part of today's event. and sharing with us your perspective. Also, my good friends at iBoss, PBL Works, Spectrum Enterprise, QWonder, Agile Education Marketing, my friends at BrainPop, and also Scholastic. And then, of course, to our panel, which, as always, lived up to true form, was really the highlight of our experience here today. I learned so much from all four of you, so thank you so very much for sharing your insights. I'm actually, and I don't know if anyone else has already planned to do this, but I need to go back and I'm going to watch the whole recording again because I want to take notes on what the students shared with us. In the facilitation mode, I wasn't able to do that, so I want to go back and watch this again. So many thanks to Kellen and to Olivia, to Sarah and to Hikari, and to your fabulous school districts and your parents and families for sharing, all of you with us. I know that we are in good hands. I say this every year. I know that we are in good hands going forward with fabulous innovators and leaders such as the four of you. So thank you so very much. With that, thank you again, Chris, for joining me. Thank you to my panel, and thanks to our fabulous audience. Your questions were amazing. Please know that we did not have a chance to get to as many questions as I wanted, but we are going to, at Project Tomorrow, we're going to take all those questions and we'll follow up with you directly if we have some data insights or some other perspectives to share with you. You will get a copy of the presentation and the recording. Please feel free to share that with your colleagues. Thank you again for joining us. It was absolutely wonderful to have this experience, and we are so pleased to be able to facilitate our first ever virtual congressional briefing here with our friends at EdWeb. Thank you very much.